Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How y'all doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am going to start a palette ranking series on my channel for any brand that I have more than 3 palettes in, so that you guys can see my thoughts and opinions on some of said palettes. There's not a whole lot of brands, honestly, that I have more than 3 palettes in, as I'm staring at them all over here. There's not a whole lot of brands that I have more than 3 palettes in. I thought I'd start with Lunar Beauty. It's an easy one for me. There's only 6 palettes in this collection for me, so I thought that I'd start there and just kind of progressively go from there. Lunar Beauty actually was a brand that I was 100% enamored with. Wanted every single palette way back in the day, and then just stopped purchasing from them for whatever reason. Not that they're palette, formulation is awful. I just need to cut the cord at some point, much like I did with ABH, much like I have done with like Pat McGrath or Melt or whatever. Not Natasha, because I'm still in that place with her. Who knows how long that'll last, but I only have 6 palettes, so it should be an easy peasy video. And with all the collection and declutter videos going on, I thought that you needed a little semblance of normalcy, and this is kind of normal and kind of awesome, and I love palette content. So that is what we're doing today. I hope that sounds like something you're interested in watching. And for those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna, lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. Ultimately, this is my self-care. I love to come out here, talk to you guys about the good, the bad, the ugly, all things coming into my collection, moving out of my collection, what that looks like. I have a ton of videos on this platform, so if this isn't your cup of tea, I'm sure that I have one out there that you can watch. Please don't forget to go into my video content. I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and there's a lot. Like my first year, I think I was uploading every single day. So there's that. But please go check them out. If you do find that you love this video, you love me, you love the content that I produce for you, please don't forget to like and subscribe to more. It really does help me out here on this channel. It's free for you, and I would love to welcome you into my YouTube fam. With that said, let's roll into this palette ranking video because I think it's going to be super fun. Today we are ranking the 6 palettes that I have in my Lunar Beauty collection. It is a brand in my collection that I have a minimal amount of palettes from. Between that and like Too Faced, those are the easy brands for me to rank, right? Because there isn't very many of them. I love Lunar Beauty. I think that Manny also is fantastic. I know that he's been canceled on and off here and there, but he honestly is the first YouTuber that I ever watched. The reason why I got so involved in the makeup space, the reason why I really started being obsessed with it, if I'm honest with you. And the first makeup tutorial that I ever followed was a Manny tutorial. So I fell in love with Manny, and therefore it just made sense that I also fall in love with his brand and start purchasing from his brand. So when he came out with his first palette, I of course had to buy it. And then I continued to buy palettes from him. But at some point you need to cut the cord. Like I said in the intro, I can't buy every single palette, right? So I have 6 palettes from this brand. I do love the formulation of this brand. I think that they have leaps and bounds gotten better since their very first palette. But I do have my favorites and my not so favorites. So we're gonna start with the number 6 palette of my Lunar Beauty collection, and that would be the first palette that he came out with. Every single palette that I'm going to be talking to you about has a palette review up on my channel. I will link my palette roulette, which is what I call them, palette roulette. I'll link that playlist up in the cards for you. This was, I believe, the very first palette roulette video that I ever did, and I liked this palette back then. Back then I also really didn't know a whole lot about makeup, let's just be honest. I was a person at that point in my life who had never used anything but eyeliner, and then suddenly decided that I needed to be a makeup artist and put makeup on my face every single day. So when I purchased this, I wasn't really heavy into the makeup space. Couldn't do these kind of things with my eyes for sure. It was very simple, very cotton socks. This is the color story of this palette, and what I liked the most about it is that it had, you know, neutrals, and it had pops of awesome, and then it had 2 shimmers in the middle that kind of went with every single look that you could want. However, they didn't go with every single look that you could want, to be honest. They went really well with these shades, but didn't go really well with these shades. In addition to that, as I said in the intro, or in the beginning of this, his formula has gotten leaps and bounds better since producing this palette. These 2 shades down here are trash. They are trash shades. The best shades in here were the white and the black, if I'm honest with you, besides the shimmers. I really did like this shimmer. It's very pretty. The colorful were not all trash. These 2 were trash, of course, but the rest of the colorful shades just weren't super pigmented. They were great and blendable, but they weren't super pigmented. They didn't last for very long, and they obviously don't last for very long now. This I did purchase when it first came out, so the formulation has changed over time, but even though it has changed over time, it still just wasn't amazing. If you go back and watch that review video, which would be, I mean, a blast from the past and kind of cringy, if I do say so myself, you will see me fawning all over this palette, but pay really close attention to the eye looks that I was able to produce with this palette, because they're just not good. The next palette I have, so number 5 for me, would be Eternal Eclipse. And the sole reason to this is the color story. This is the color story of this palette. I just am not, or was not, like a blues kind of person. You obviously, I'm saying that, and my eyes are bright blue today. That's how it happens. I'm just not a blue person, and when I am a blue person, I do want a brighter blue, right? Not like a navy. This is a really great navy in my collection, but it is also not the best navy in my collection. The easiest row to manage and navigate through is the center row, because it's all just neutrals. The shimmers are beautiful. I thought that this one was really, really pretty. I even thought that this one was really, really pretty, which is surprising because I don't really like a gold. But this just was about color story for me. This is just not my favorite palette colors. So that's why this one comes in at number 5. My number 4 palette would be the Lunar Beauty Greek Goddess palette. This was the first like set of makeup products that I bought, right? Makeup brands used to launch all these products all in one like collection. Some brands still do that. This was the first collection that I purchased, I think, from Lunar Beauty. I think before that point I had purchased also the Too Faced Peach Perfect collection, or parts of it, but this one I purchased everything. So this is what the palette looks like, and first and foremost, I mean, it's a beautiful palette, but then when you open it up, this is the color story. And it just doesn't scream Greek goddess to me, in my humble opinion, but also this is an older palette for Lunar Beauty. Again, the formulations have been just leaps and bounds formulated better than they were in this one. I had a really tough time with the shadows in this palette, which I shouldn't have had because it's mostly neutral. The best shadow that I feel like is in this palette is this one here. I do feel like the blue is a beautiful like shimmery blue, but the shimmers in this palette were just not up to par against the rest of his shimmers in his collection. And I understand that this was one of the first palettes that he ever came out with, so the shimmers are going to be different than his current shimmers, but they just weren't fantastic. And I did find that the shades in this palette also kind of blended away to nothing instead of really laying pigment on your eyes. Love the packaging, superb packaging, but that would be my number 4. And it's interesting to me because this really, because of formulation, should land in 4 or in 5, but because this one has a better, more easily navigated color story than this one, that is why it is number 4 instead of number 5. Number 3 for me is going to be the Nude Prism palette. The Nude Prism palette actually is a really beautiful palette. It's just, again, in the number 3 spot because of color story, not because it's bad. I really think that the formula of these shadows are fantastic. I do think that there's a lot of redundancy in this palette though. We could have done away with 2 of the shimmers in this row and maybe had some different, more nuanced shimmers than what is in here, because 3 of these shimmers look the exact same on an eye look. So I really feel like I wanted for just a little bit more with this palette. I love that they go from really, really light to really, really deep. I love that it's kind of got this like rosy pinky base to it across all the neutrals that you would ever need for that kind of eye look. I just feel like, again, I wish there was a little bit more nuance to this palette. You can do an all nude palette and still have some different idiosyncrasies to it, or nuances, as I've been saying. That's my word of the day apparently, to it, to create still a beautiful palette without there being a redundant feel to it. I think that it's a beautiful palette. It does excite me to use it when I wear it. I think that every single time I wear this palette, my eye looks are stunning. I just also think that the 2 palettes in front of it excite me more than this one, so that's why this one comes in at number 3. Number 2 and number 1 for me were really hard because I like them both for the same reasons, but also feel like they should be number 1 for the same reasons. I know that that sounds just really weird and stupid. I think I would put this one at number 2 because it is just a little more out there, less everyday. And if you are, you know, a person who has to have like an everyday eye look going to work, this would not work for you in that way. So I'm putting this at number 2 simply because of the color story, but ultimately some of my favorite eye looks I have ever done have come from this palette. As a matter of fact, on my banner on my page, almost all of those eye looks came from this palette. So I think the other palette that they came from was the next one in line. This is the Strawberry Dream palette, and I mean, this is beautiful. This is truly a beautiful palette. Everything about this palette is beautiful. This shade came to me busted, but I was able just to press it back in. No harm, no foul. It works perfectly. Every single eye look I have gotten from this palette has been an amazing eye look. These colors are bright and poppy and beautiful and blend like a dream. They pretty much blend themselves. The shimmers are beautiful and go with every single shade in this palette. I think the one shadow that I would say this palette could do without is the gold, but that's a preference thing. I don't really love gold, but also, in my humble opinion, it doesn't really go with any of the rest of the shades here, except for this one, which might look cream, but it's actually a white gold. So I just don't think it goes. A lot of people like gold. I just don't. I love this palette. Everything about this palette is amazing to me. Even the blues, with the blues that were in the Life's a Drag palette and the blues that were in the Eternal Eclipse palette. When I purchased this palette, I was going to steer away from those blues because up till this point, like, he had not done a really great job with blues. These are beautiful blues. These are some of my favorite blues in my palette collection. These shades are just so buttery soft and blend so well, and the longevity is amazing. And only because it's not a palette that I think that everybody can look at and see an eye look, an everyday eye look from. For me, it's not a big deal, but like if you're at an office job and you can't wear bright pinks and vivid blues and stuff on your eyes, this would not be a palette that you could use every day. And that is the only reason why it's number 2 for me. The number 1 palette for me would be this one, and that is the Moonspell palette. And I wish I had this second one. I'm on a no-buy this year, so I cannot purchase it, but man, if it's available when I get done with this no-buy year, it will be mine. It will be in my collection. So I do have this at number 1 because it does have some really beautiful purples, really beautiful greens, and a whole row of neutrals so that you can use this as an everyday palette if that is what you require for your everyday. You can use the neutrals with pops, or you could do a whole colorful eye look with this. You can bounce around, but each one of these rows creates a really beautiful eye look. The shimmers are stunning. The mattes, again, super buttery soft, blend like a dream, and the pigment is there. Everything has really great longevity in this palette. None of the shimmers are super like clunky or chunky and flake off everywhere all day long. This one is a surprise shimmer. It's kind of like this beautiful like periwinkle, like iridescent, like almost unicorn-esque look to it. I just love everything about this palette. So it was going to be number 2 for me because of the color in it, but I think that it needs to be number 1 because it does provide for that color lover to also have a little bit of neutrality in their eye looks for work days if this is what they require for their work. This would be my number 1 Lunar Beauty palette. So with that said, that is it. That is all I have for you. But I would be interested to know, do you have Lunar Beauty in your collection? How many palettes do you have by Lunar Beauty? And what is your ranking? What does your favorite and least favorite Lunar Beauty palette look like? I would be interested in hearing also from any of you who, obviously I haven't bought a Lunar Beauty palette in a very long time. I picked up the Nude Prism actually at JCPenney, and so stoked that JCPenney has Lunar Beauty, but they don't have like a lot of the newer things and or the like limited edition ones like the Moonspell 2 or whatever it was. I would be interested to hear from you, especially if you have different palettes for me and what you think that I'm missing in my Lunar Beauty collection, because like I said, I haven't purchased one in a very long time. I had to cut the cord at some point, and I decided to cut the cord when I was so distraught over not getting the Moonspell palette the first or second time it was released, and felt like my whole world was ending. And then he put out Life's a Drag 2, and I think that is a palette that I decided I was not purchasing, and that's when that cord was cut. After that, I didn't need to purchase every single palette because I wasn't going to have every single palette. And I did think about purchasing, I think it was his holiday palette last year where he came out with this palette and then you got a different shade like every day in this advent calendar. I thought that that was really cool. But I elected not to, and you know, after seeing the color story of it, I'm really glad that I elected not to. But some of his palettes, I think he has one with fairies and toadstools that is just such a beautiful grungy color story. I could totally see me purchasing that one. Yeah. Look at me going on a tangent over Lunar Beauty, but I'd be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on what your favorite Lunar Beauty palette is and what your least favorite Lunar Beauty palette is, and what you think of my ranking and what you think of me doing these videos. Are you into it? Are you not into it? Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if there's a video that you would like me to do. And with that said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you and yours are doing well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best that you can. I hope that you are all loving each other, being kind humans, and living your best life. And until next time, bye friends.